السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحابته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم انزل علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. وصل لهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. I wanted to inshallah go over a booklet that was written by a man known as Sultan Al-Ulema, the Sultan of the scholars, Izzuddin Abdul Aziz bin Abdul Salam Al-Sulaimi, and he died in 660. He lived in Egypt, and he was known also to have mastered the two madhabs, which is rare in the history of Islam. In fact, I think he's the only person that really has that maqam. But he wrote this book, and he called it Al-Fitna wal-Baraya wal-Mahan wal-Razaya wal-Fawa'id wal-Balwa wal-Mahan. The Book of Calamities, Tribulations, Hardships and Disasters, or the benefits of tribulation and tests. And he wrote it actually to point out all the tests, the benefits that come from having tribulation in your life. And one of the aspects of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taslima, one of the most extraordinary aspects of the Prophet ﷺ's life is that he never allowed tribulations to disquiet him. In other words, he never allowed any difficulties that he faced or hardships to perturb him, to put him in a state of turbulence. And the word in Arabic for somebody who has forbearance is called halim. And the word halim is a word that the Prophet ﷺ was described as وَكَانَ أَحْلَمَ النَّاسِ. He had more forbearance than anybody else. That's a description. Now, the word for intellect is hilm. That's one of the words for intellect, is hilm. One of the things they accused the Prophet ﷺ of was يُسَفِّهُ أَحْلَامَنَا. He causes us to lose our intellects, or to make us look like fools, because safiyah is opposite of halim. So the man of intellect is somebody who has hilm, and the man without intellect is somebody who has safaha. And safaha is, they call it khiffat al-aql. It's safaha is a lightness, there's no stability. Because what intellect should do is it should stabilize you. And that's why the halim is somebody who does not get disquieted. He doesn't get perturbed in life. Now, what's interesting about disquietude is that the word for dreamer is halim. The word for a person who's dreaming is halam. Right? Now, why do you think the word for somebody who does not get perturbed is halim, and the word for a dreamer is halim? Ahlam is intellect, but it's also dreams. Adghathul ahlam in Surah Yusuf. The dreams were called empty dreams. Why do you think there's a connection between hilm and dream and intellect? Yeah, it's hard to dream when somebody's agitating you. Dreams need a state of quietude in order for you to sleep. Now, the word for nipple is halama. And a child, when they're at the nipple, what happens to their state? What does the mother do when the child's in a perturbed state, the infant? She gives it the breast, which is called halama. And what happens to the child? It goes into a state of complete quietude and relaxation. Now, isn't it interesting that milk and knowledge are from the same source? And that's why when Sayyidina Umar in the sound hadith saw a dream in which the Prophet, milk was coming out of his fingers and Sayyidina Umar was drinking it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-ilm, al-ilm. It's knowledge, it's knowledge. So, isn't it interesting that ghawaya, which means to go astray, means the inability to digest milk? In Arabic, you can look these up in Arabic dictionary. Ghawaya, which is to go astray, the root of it means the inability to digest milk. Because our first stage is to get through the 2 years. And in Western developmental psychology, they call it that first crisis is trust versus mistrust. That's what the child needs to realize, is that they are in a safe environment. And if they're not given milk, they're neglected by their mother, if they're mistreated, they don't get through that first developmental stage, and then every stage after that is a disaster. According to Erickson, I mean, this is a theory in developmental psychology, but my point of bringing that up is that trust versus mistrust is related to whether or not the mother removes the disquietude of the child or not. Because that's the key thing that the mother has to do, is recognize that the cry of the baby, there's a reason babies cry. And if you grew up in this country in the 60s, there was a character named Dr. Spock, and they're always giving new theories about how to raise children. But one of the theories in the 50s was mothers should ignore the cry of the child and regulate the milk according to fixed times, which is complete insanity. But that's what they did. And now look at the society out there. So the Halim, the person who's Halim, is a person who, in the face of tribulation, whether it's a person or whether it's a circumstance, they do not lose their cool. They do not become perturbed. And this is the hallmark of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of his behavior with people and with circumstances, is that, for instance, he is described, whenever people would speak ill to him, he would return with idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Idfa' billati hiya ahsan. The Quran says, give a bad turn, repay it with a good turn. The Prophet ﷺ, when he was migrating from Mecca to Medina, he actually, ﷺ, according to the narration, Abu Bakr was very perturbed. He was troubled. And he would look at the Prophet, and the Prophet ﷺ, even though Suraqa ibn Malik was right behind them, and Abu Bakr was worried not about himself, he was worried about the Messenger of Allah. So he was in an act of ibadah. But the Prophet ﷺ was in a state of tranquility, and he was reciting the Quran, unperturbed. When they were in the cave, and Abu Bakr was very nervous, because right outside were the Quraysh, literally outside of the cave. And the Prophet ﷺ was in a complete unperturbed state. In battles, they said that the Prophet ﷺ used to hide behind him some of the people when it got very difficult, what they call ma'ma'at al-ma'raka. So the famous story of the Jew that came to the Prophet ﷺ and purposely upset him in order to elicit a response, and it was Omar who got very angry, and the Prophet was completely unperturbed, even though he was insulted by this man. And the man said that he had seen all of the characters of prophecy except for one, Hilm, and he needed to test that. And so he purposely evoked a negative response but didn't get it from the Prophet ﷺ. So he knew that he had Hilm, or forbearance. So one of the things about people that are disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that they get completely disquieted whenever things get difficult. And it's a sign of weak iman. People whose iman is weak, when they lose the slightest thing, you see them disquieted, perturbed. One of the things that we are increasingly becoming incapable of is listening to each other. Just talk, human beings, without getting disquieted. So people can't have civil arguments. They can't have discussions, because once we start talking, I get heated. You elicit a response from me. Like there was a physician in India who used to treat people with ruqya, and one of these modern physicians thought he was completely insane. And when he started arguing with him about this, and he said, how do you think words can affect anything? You need to give people antibiotics, and you need to give them things that will change their state. And so the other physician who believed in ruqya called him a donkey. And he got really angry. And then he called him a pig, and he was about to kill him. And he said, 2 words I said to you, and look at how they've changed your state. You're red and ready to kill me because of 2 words. So words have a power to elicit responses from us. And so what hilm is the ability to not allow your buttons to be pushed. And it's one of the gifts of Islam. If people take it seriously, it's hard to do, and we're all working on it at some degree. People get better at it than others, but it takes a great deal of effort, and it doesn't stop. It gets finer and finer. But removing resentment from the heart is a really difficult thing. Hasad, all these diseases of the heart. So this book he wrote as a way of helping people to understand what tribulations really are. Because one of the reasons we get disquieted about difficulties is we don't understand what the wisdom of the difficulty is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's one of the real problems. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a difficult situation, if you believe in Allah, the difference between you and somebody who does not believe in Allah is that you will derive benefit from that condition. Now, one of the beauties of the creation, and for me, one of the greatest proofs of the existence of God, is that if you do not believe in God, you will live in a world that is godless. And I really think that that is a proof for the existence of God. Because if you believe in God, you will live in a world filled with God. But if you disbelieve in God, you will constantly be reaffirmed in your disbelief. And that's why atheists can't understand people that believe in God, and people that believe in God can't understand atheists. Because both of them are seeing a proof for their belief. They really are. And that's one of the meanings, I think, of the hadith, أَنَا عِنْدَ الظَّنِّ عَبْدِي بِي فَلْيَظُنَّ بِيَ مَا شَاءَ. I am in the opinion of my servant. So if my servant thinks I'm nothing, that's what he finds. Allah is in the understanding of the believer. So if you believe Allah is with you, Allah is with you. If you don't believe He's with you, He's not with you. And that's why despair is haram in every Abrahamic tradition. It's haram. And in Catholicism, it's the unpardonable sin in Catholicism. To despair from the mercy of God is actually the one thing they say is not forgiven. And that's Iblis, ablasa. That's his disease. He despaired. And so he wants everybody else to despair. So part of the game that's being played in the world is to make everybody think that it's all horrible. And whenever you talk to people that don't believe in God, or people in this age in particular, that's what do they say to you? Look around you. How can you believe in God? Well, that's my whole point. I'm looking around. How can I not believe in God? So where's the problem? The problem is in what they call evil. And this is ultimately what every argument against the existence of God rests upon. It rests upon what they call the problem of evil. And that is why, if somebody tells you they don't believe in God, what you should ask them to do is explain to me what your definition of God is, because we might not believe in that same thing. In other words, I might agree with you. That I don't believe in that thing. Because one of the things that they've done is that they're trapped in a Christian Manichaean worldview, which is where good and evil are separate entities. Whereas we believe good and evil are both creations of Allah. See, the Christians can't explain evil because they say God is all good and God is all powerful. Well, if God's all good and all powerful, how do we explain evil in the world? Because if He's all good, He wouldn't create evil. And if He's all powerful, He would remove it from the world. This is what they call the problem of evil in philosophy. That's the argument. So that is ultimately what atheists have a problem with. So one of the benefits of this is that we had scholars that looked at tribulations and said, never think something is evil because you don't know. Now, on the one hand, we have a sharia that says killing is evil, right? So if somebody kills another person unjustly, that's evil. And the person should be punished or forgiven or whatever's done, but it's a wrong that needs to be redressed. So Sharia is something that we have to live with, the law that Allah has given us. Just like here in this society, we have laws. Many of them are congruous with our system of law, and that's what Raghib al-Isbahani calls al-adala al-muttaqa, which is shared by Muslims and non-Muslims. And then you have what's called al-adala al-muqayyada, which relates to the sharia or the sacred law that a specific prophet has brought. And that adala can actually change. It can actually change. But adala muttaqa, it's wrong to take somebody else's property. Everybody agrees on that. And that's the basis of entering into transactions with non-Muslims. And that's why Muslims can transact with non-Muslims. Because if we didn't have a shared understanding of justice, we couldn't communicate. But every non-Muslim who's got any brains at all will agree with us on many basic points. And this is how it's capable for Muslims and non-Muslims to live together based on these shared things. There are other things where we disagree, and then the Sharia has ways of dealing with that. In a Muslim society even, non-Muslims are allowed to do things that Muslims aren't allowed to do. So he begins this book, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Every Muslim traditionally began their book with either Bismillah or Alhamdulillah. And that was because the Prophet ﷺ said that anything that begins without Bismillah is cut off from barakah. And so it's a way of maintaining barakah. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم تسليما. قال شيخ الإمام حجة الإسلام معتمد الأنام أبو محمد عبد العزيز ابن عبد السلام ابن أبي القاسم السلمي الشافعي نفع الله به المسلمين وغفر لنا وله ولجميع المؤمنين. That the Sheikh, and Sheikh in Arabic has several meanings. One of them is simply just an old man. Shaykh, he gets gray hairs. And Sheikh also means the head of a tribe. It can be somebody who has wealth. It can mean a dignified person. But here it's used to signify somebody who has wisdom. And because usually wisdom comes with old age, so a sheikh. And then al-imam, imam is a paragon, somebody that embodies something. Amma ya'ummu means to intend something or to move towards something. And ummah is a group of people that are moving towards the same object. That's what a ummah is. It's a people that are bound together by the same goal. And that's why the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ has the same goal, to get to paradise. And then the mother is obviously, she is the which is related to the same root word. Hujjat al-Islam. Hujjah is a proof, and that was a level, a degree that certain scholars reach where they actually become like Imam al-Ghazali, who is the famous Hujjat al-Islam, becomes a proof for the existence, or for the truth of Islam. That person has become, the fact that they exist is a proof that Islam is true. Mu'tamad al-Anam, the one that all of the creatures depend upon. And Anam generally means the things that sleep, but it also means the ins and the jinn. And Imam al-Tabari says about وَوَضَعَ الْأَرْضَ لِلْأَنَامِ, that He placed the earth for the anam, that it means all the living creatures, things that sleep. And also the ulama are a benefit to the creatures because they defend their rights. Creatures have rights, trees have rights, all these. And this is a modern argument in the West, whether creation has legal standing or not. I mean, that's an argument that environmentalist lawyers have brought up. Whereas the Muslims dealt with these things, that they are to be protected. So, and then his name is Abu Muhammad Abdul Aziz ibn Abdul Salam, and he was Shafi'i, but he also mastered the Maliki madhab. And then he says, نَفَعَ اللَّهُ بِهِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, may Allah benefit the Muslims by him. And see, even today, 800 years after he wrote this book, we're here in California benefiting by his words. And so the dua was answered. May we benefit by this Imam. وَلَهُ وَلِجَمِيعِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and all the believers. غَفَرَ لَنَا وَلَهُ وَلِجَمِيعِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, may Allah forgive us and him and all the believers. لِلْمَصَائِبِ وَالْمِحَنِ وَالْبَلَايَ وَالرَّزَايَا فَوَائِدُ تَخْتَلِفُ بِاخْتِلَافِ رُتَبِ النَّاسِ. Calamities and tests and tribulations and disasters have different benefits based upon the different ranks of people. Now this is an important idea. Rutba is a rank. It's used in modern Arabic in military rank. The rutab are the ranks that people are in relation to Allah. So just as you have in the military, because وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ إِلَّا هُوَ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُوَ, nobody knows the armies of your Lord except Allah. So Allah has junud. Now, people have different ranks. You have generals, you have colonels, and then even within that you have ranks. And then you have majors and captains and lieutenants and sergeants and corporals. People are ranks. Now, in the people of the Zahir actually wear uniforms to let them know what their ranks are. In Islam, those ranks are hidden. You don't know the stations of people with Allah. It's something Allah has hidden. One of the ulama said that Allah hid three things. أَخْفَى ثَلَاثَ فِي ثَلَاث. He hid three things in three things. He hid His rida fi ta'atihi. He hid His contentment in His obedience. So in other words, you never know what Allah will accept from you. Allah might not accept a great thing you did that was an act of obedience, but He might accept a small thing, like the prostitute who was forgiven for giving a dog water. That's the reason that she was forgiven, for giving a dog water. So Allah has hidden His contentment in His obedience. وَأَخْفَى سَخَطَهُ فِي مَعْصِيَتِهِ. And He hid His wrath in disobedience. So the woman who locked up the cat and went to hell for locking up a cat, that was the thing. She obviously, that's an indication of her state. She was obviously a cruel woman, because if you don't have compassion with animals, it's a sign of cruelty. And in our society, we know that children that are abusive to animals and torture animals when they're young often end up becoming very abusive when they're old. So there's a relationship between kindness towards animals and kindness towards humans. And that is why, one of the reasons why every prophet was a shepherd. Because they learned to be gentle to animals, because that is a transitional phase into being gentle to... Because if you're kind to animals, you should certainly seem that you would be kind to humans, which are we're the highest on that chain, hierarchy of beings. So, I mean, people say, you wouldn't treat a dog like that. You know, like, why are you treating me like that? You know, well, because dogs are faithful and you were unfaithful. So he says benefits are based on the differences of the ranks of people. So, for some people, a tribulation removes wrongs. Imam Al-Ghazali radiallahu anhu said that there are wrongs in this world that are only removed by depression. That, if you're wondering why people get depressed from dhunub. I mean, and also the soul. You see, I don't care what anybody says about alternative lifestyles and all these people out there doing. I guarantee you, people have trouble in their soul. You can numb it, you can preoccupy yourself, you can entertain yourself, you can do all these things to not deal with the soul's anguish, but you cannot remove the anguish of the soul. It's not possible. Which is why, Marx said religion is the opiate of the masses, and Abdul Hakim Winter said, but opium is the religion of the masses. That's the idol, is escape from reality. That's what they're worshiping. Because they'll do anything for that idol. And all they're trying to do is numb the pain of existence. But the existence is painful because you are not fulfilling your function. And when you don't fulfill your function, there's always trouble. And anytime anything in the body is not fulfilling its function, what is the first sign to let you know that you should go to a doctor? Pain. There's some type of disquietude in the body to let you know it's not fulfilling its function. So if suddenly you've got this pain in your liver, and you go and he says, you've got hepatitis. That pain was to let you know the function has been disrupted. The same is true for the soul. If you're not fulfilling your function, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, testify to His unity, and to behave accordingly, then you will be in pain and suffering until you come into accordance. And that's a gift from Allah, in the same way that pain, signs and symptoms are gifts for people so that they can go to a physician and get well. If there weren't signs and symptoms, that's why hypertension is such a dangerous disease, because people can walk around and not feel any discomfort from hypertension, and they can die from it. So pain in the soul is there. But people will do things, and that's what people do. See, what kufr is essentially is covering up. Now, if you get a headache and you go and take Tylenol, you're not getting rid of the headache. You're suppressing the symptom. So if you are sick in your soul from your kufr, and you go and you do things in order to remove the pain of the kufr, you're just covering up more. And that's why it's dhulumat, fawqa dhulumat. It's darknesses over covering darknesses. And you just keep covering up more and more and more until that person is so diseased that it's a hopeless case unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervenes. But that's what happens to people. And so the ranks of people differ. Now, the prophets, upon them all be peace, the prophets have tribulation not to remove their wrongs, but to elevate them in rank. It's not to remove their wrongs. And that's the case of some of the salihin as well. It actually becomes irtifa', raf' darajat. They're moving up in degrees. And ashaddu nas ibtila'an, the people of the greatest tribulation are the prophets, and then those closest to them, and then those closest to them, and those closest to them. It's like that. Now, obviously, you can see people in the world, and you look at them, and you see tribulations. Like there's non-Muslims, and you see the tribulations that they're in, and you wonder about that. Well, according to Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, that he said that there's no tribulation that doesn't have a tribulation that could be worse than it. And so it's difficult to assess what really is happening when you look at people. But this is one of the problems in religion, is suffering in the world and the different degrees of tribulation out there. And this is the way that we view tribulation for the believer. For people outside of Islam, there's a whole other set of rules working. Because when you know things, you have an accountability that is not included when you do not know things. And one of the things that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said that he noticed about Islam is that when they entered into Islam and they would do something wrong, they would see an immediate effect of that, whereas they never saw it in the Jahiliyyah. And that was because of their maqam with Allah. So there was once the Prophet ﷺ was walking, and there was a young man who saw a woman, and he was looking at the woman, and he ran into the wall. And the Prophet ﷺ said that that was his removal of the wrong, that it happened immediately. And so that actually was a blessing, to have that wrong removed. Now there's another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ went to a man who was completely devastated. He was dying, he was in his bed, flesh and bone, and completely wasted. And he said, "What did you ask Allah?" He said, "I asked Him to purify me of all my sins." And he said, "Don't ask Allah for that, because you can't take it. But ask Him for afiyah, for well-being. Don't ask Him for that, because you don't want that. You don't want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify your sins in this world. You want Him to remove your sins by forgiveness." That's what we want. And that's why a sincere tawbah is what we need. We need a sincere tawbah to Allah. We don't want to have to do all these things and then get these things happening to us because of the wrongs that we're doing. But that's what happens. And don't think that it gets any easier, but what happens with the people, the salihin, is that they get to a point where they're content with what's happening. It's no longer painful because they're in such a state. A woman, one of the salihat, was walking and she stumbled and hurt her leg. And she began to laugh. And somebody thought she was crazy and said, "Are you Majnuna?" And she said, "No, but I fell, and then when the pain came, I remembered the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said that a believer doesn't get a shoke, a thorn in his foot, except it removes wrongs. And the sweetness of my wrongs being removed overwhelmed my pain." That she was actually, alhamdulillah, that's iman. Those are spiritual endorphins kicking in. There are spiritual endorphins. All those things are mithal. They're just, what you see in the world is just a metaphor for the unseen world. They have opium. There's spiritual opium. I mean, there's things that can put out your pain. When one of the Sahaba had an arrow, they said, "Wait till he goes into prayer to remove it." You think these are stories? You think these are like things people made up and like fairy tales and things like that? Seriously, these are not made up stories. These are things people witnessed with their own eyes. And they removed the arrow during his prayer because he couldn't feel it. And don't think, I broke this arm severely. I had a Colles fracture. It's one of the worst kinds you can get on your wrist. And they gave me something called fentanyl. They could have broken my leg. I wouldn't have cared because of that drug. And it only lasts it's a very short lasting drug. The half-life is very quick and it's used. It's a morphine derivative. But once they gave me the fentanyl, he could have done anything. He took it and pulled it down and reset it. I didn't feel anything. I was in complete bliss. from a drug. And that's just a chemical reaction happening in the brain. That's all it is. So don't think that those are stories. Those things are real. People go into those states with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where they do not feel pain. They actually feel delight. And that's not something that you should ask Allah for, let me delight in my calamities. You should ask Allah for afiyah. But you should recognize that when the calamities come, they come for a deep wisdom. So he says, أَحَدُهَا مَعْرِفَةُ عِزَّ الرُّبُوبِيَّةِ وَقَهْرِهَا. The first benefit is that you realize the power of lordship over you. You realize that Allah is Rabb and you are Marboob. And the nature of lordship is that lordship lords over you. And this is why when tribulations come to you, لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله إن لله وإنا إليه راجعون. They should remind you this is beyond. There's things you can control. In my environment here, there's things I can control. I'm thirsty. I have a cup. Allah's given me will. Bismillah, I can drink. I can quench my thirst. Allah has given me that, but He can take it away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, la qadar Allah, can not only remove the power of motion. Guillain-Barré. Has anybody ever seen a person with Guillain-Barré? The virus, where they have to be on ventilators, they can't move. Healthy young people in their 20s get afflicted with this disease. And one of the miracles of that is sometimes they actually recover and get back their motion. So it's like this period where Allah removes it all from them and then gives it back. But then there's other times they don't get it back. And that's when they see what the reality, because this is the illusion. The illusion is I'm free, I'm independent, I can do whatever I want. I mean, we've got 6 billion people walking around on this planet under that delusion. But when the calamity comes, suddenly that delusion is taken away. And that's why Lee Atwater, does anybody remember that name? Lee Atwater? He was the Republican head of the election committee. He basically destroyed Dukakis's when Dukakis ran for Democratic president. Lee Atwater wrote an extraordinary, and it's worth reading. It's a confessional that he wrote right before he died, because at the age of 39, and this was a man who by dunya standards in this society had it all. That's what they said about him. He was young, handsome, wealthy, powerful. He had it all. He was a Machiavellian politician that basically destroyed people's lives. He said that he based his life on Machiavelli's book, The Prince. That was his Bible. And then at the age of 39, he got a tumor in the brain. And all he wanted to do was ask forgiveness of all the people that he had destroyed. And he wrote it. It's really worth reading what he wrote, because he said suddenly he realized. And that's what it takes for some people. That's what it takes to learn that lesson. So learning that Allah is Lord and He is qahirun fawqa ibadihi, that He overpowers His servants. The second benefit is ma'rifatu dhillat al-ubudiyyati wa kasriha, that you realize your abject servanthood and your complete state of resignation and brokenness before the will and power of Allah. وَإِلَيْهِ الْإِشَارَةُ بِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى, and to this the words of God indicate when He said, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Those who, when an affliction strikes them, they say, surely to God we belong and to Him we return. اعترفوا بأنهم ملكه وعبيده. They finally admit that they are in the dominion. They admit in this, when the calamity comes, they admit we are the dominion of God. Inna lillahi, we belong to God. In other words, if I take something, if I take this, if I owned it, and I took it and threw it out, and you say, you can't do that. Why can't I do that? This is mine. I own it. I can do whatever I want with it. That's the nature of property. Property is the property is that the one who owns it has the right to do what he wills with it. That's the nature of property. If you don't have that quality of possession, then it's not really your property. Now, because the dunya is not our property, we can't do whatever we want with it, can we? But we understand the concept of property. This world is the dominion of God, and therefore God can do whatever He wants with it. Now, the nature of, you see, if I have a book and I burn it, and you say to me, you can't do that. Yes, I can. It's my book, and I want to burn it. You shouldn't burn books. Maybe I shouldn't, but I can, and you can't stop me by law. So then if the person asks you, why did you burn the book? Because there's mistakes in it. Oh, I didn't realize. Now I've explained myself, and now it makes sense to you. This is Musa and Al-Khidr, right? In that story of Al-Kahf, which is the story of the problem of evil. That story solves the problem of evil. Because Musa is looking with the eye of the outward, and everything he sees is wrong. But when it's explained to him by a servant who was given knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, suddenly the Musa is saying, I didn't realize. Now I have an explanation. Well, what happens on Yawm al-Qiyamah? Allah tells us in the Quran, He explains it all to us. And then everybody's going to say, now it makes sense. The difference between the believer and the kafir is in this world we're saying, we know it makes sense, and we're willing to wait until the day of judgment to have it explained. Because we trust Allah. They're saying, no, it's wrong. How do you know? You don't have all the information. You cannot make a judgment about a thing unless you completely understand that thing. Al-hukmu ala shay'in far'un an tasawwurihi. To judge a thing is only one aspect of conceptualizing the entirety of that thing. It's a principle in logic. And that's why a judge has to know all the facts. If you prejudge, it's called prejudice. And it's considered to be a moral vice, to be prejudiced. So we cannot prejudge God. We don't have that right to do that. We cannot prejudge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who knows all things. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And as for you, you have only been given a small amount of knowledge. So how can you judge it? On the way here, I was talking with a physician in the car, and one of the things that he said was, he was talking with a nephrologist, or one of his anatomy professors said, we don't even know how we urinate. We don't really understand it. We can explain to you what we know, but why it's happening, how this whole thing is working, how the kidneys are doing all this, we don't really understand it. Well, and I responded to him by saying Imam al-Ghazali was once asked by a man, where is God? Ayn Allah. And Imam al-Ghazali wrote a poem back to him, and in the poem he said, you don't even know how you drink water and then how you urinate it. What's happening in between? You don't know your coordinates in the universe. How can you ask where God is? I mean, I love these maps in astronomy books where they show our galaxy and they say, you are here. They put this little, I'm serious, they do it in astronomy books. They have the Milky Way, and then they say, you are here. Give me those coordinates. Seriously, you know what coordinates are based on? Coordinate system. XYZ, yeah, right. You have to have a system. You have to have, like here we have what are called cardinal points, which don't even exist in reality because cardinal points are experiential. It's all flat earth. Cardinal points are all based on pre-Copernican theories about the universe, but that's all we've got. So if you ask for my coordinates here in California, it's based on arbitrary points of reference, like Greenwich. Who chose Greenwich? The English happened to be the most powerful people at the time, so it was Greenwich. It could have been Istanbul. It's arbitrary. You don't know where you are in the universe. How do you know where God is? But this is the ignorance of man. Because man is in a delusional state. And the problem with delusion, this is the most troubling thing for me, as a person that understands this intellectually, the problem with delusion is nobody who is deluded sees their delusion. That is the problem of delusion, is you do not understand that you're deluded. Arrogant people are often completely oblivious to their arrogance. They don't realize that they're being arrogant. But they see themselves as better than you. And that's where the arrogance comes from. And to see themselves as better than you is a delusional state, because in reality they do not know whether or not they are better than you. They might be, but they don't know. See, you didn't ask me what were the other things that there was one thing I left out of the three things. That just reminded me of that. أَخْفَى أَوْلِيَاءُهُ فِي عِبَادِهِ. He's hidden his awliya amongst his servants. And the frightening thing about this is, it might even be a non-Muslim. That's the amazing thing about it. Because Imam al-Qurtubi said that Sayyidina Umar was beloved to God when he was in Mecca prostrating to idols. So you don't even know. You could meet a person and he could be better than you. And that's why Habib Umar told one of the students that was in Yemen, when you go to America, he said, if you want to call Americans to Islam, never call anybody, talk to them about Islam, except that you assume that he's better than you. Not that he's lower than you, that he's actually better than you. And that methodology is what spread Islam all over the world. Because what he said is that you now know the truth, and so any disobedience you do, you have no excuse for. Whereas as long as he's in a state of ignorance, it might be an excuse with his Lord until the message comes to him. Because we believe that people that haven't been given a message are forgiven. So then he says that they admit that they are his dominion and his servants, وَأَنَّهُمْ رَاجِعُونَ إِلَى حُكْمِهِ وَتَدْبِيرِهِ, and ultimately they must return to his judgment and decree, to his planning and management in them, وَقَضَائِهِ, and to his fate, وَتَقْدِيرِهِ, and to his measuring out. لَا مَفَرَّ لَهُم مِّنْهُ, they have no place of refuge from him, وَلَا مَحِيدَ لَهُمْ عَنْهُ, and no way out. The third benefit of calamities is الإخلاص لله تعالى إذ لا مرجع في دفع الشدائد إلا إليه. The third is sincerity to Allah, because one has no place of return in putting off or defending against the calamities except to him. So it makes you sincere, because the mukhlis is the one that calls on God without any shirk. So if you realize you have no other place, لَا مَلْجَأَ مِنْهُ إِلَّا إِلَيْهِ, they realized that they had no place of refuge from him except to him. That state is a great gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it puts you in a state of ikhlas. And one of the ulama said that a moment of ikhlas in this world is enough to save a person. Just to be in that state of ikhlas with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is a great gift. وَلَا مُعْتَمَدْ فِي كَشْفِهَا إِلَّا عَلَيْهِ, and there's no source to depend upon in removal of that calamity except upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, وَإِن يَمْسِسْكَ اللَّهُ بِضُرٍّ فَلَا كَاشِفَ لَهُ إِلَّا هُ. If Allah afflicts you with some harm, there's no remover of that harm except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except Him. وَإِذَا رَكِبُوا فِي الْفُلْكِ دَعُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. When they get on a boat and then there's turbulence and waves, suddenly they're calling Allah sincerely. These are people that are not, they're in a bad state, but Allah's saying in that state they're mukhlisun. Because when the calamities come, so that is a benefit of calamities, is that they make, and how many times, wallahi, you ask yourselves, every one of you right now, you ask yourself, how many times has a calamity afflicted you and it led to that state? Where you really felt, you're the only one that can help me in this. That's how I became Muslim, wallahi. I mean, I remember very clearly when I was 17 years old, I had an incredible tribulation. And I remember the night. I was in a car. I'll never forget that night where I know that I called on Allah with absolute sincerity. I remember it very clearly. And that prayer got answered. And that's the beauty, because that's the Ism al-Azam. If you call on Allah, that is the Ism al-Azam. The greatest name is the name that has no partnership with it. The fourth benefit, al-inabatu ila Allah ta'ala wal-iqbalu alayh. وَإِذَا مَسَّ الْإِنسَانَ ضُرٌّ دَعَى رَبَّهُ مُنِيبًا إِلَيْهِ. That he returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and suddenly is fervent in his desire of his Lord. So that's a benefit. Allah says when a harm afflicts the human, he calls on his Lord, returning back to him, to his Lord. The fifth one, al-khamisatu at-tadarru'u wa-du'a, that it leads to a humbled state before God and prayers, that you're calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا مَسَّ الْإِنسَانَ ضُرٌّ دَعَانَا. When the harm afflicts a person, he calls on us. Da'ana. So one of the things that Allah loves, and there's a hadith that Allah afflicts people He loves just to hear them call on Him. Subhanallah. It's only for a short time. I mean, that's the thing. If you just keep it in perspective, it's just like the dentist. He said, this is only going to hurt for a second. But he's doing it for your benefit. And that's why you let him do it. It's true or not true. You know, somebody when they're pulling out the sliver, you know, this is just going to hurt for a second. Just, okay, go ahead. Oh, it's over. That's what you say when they, you know, you do something to the child, get a sliver out. It's just for a second. And then they're crying and crying and crying. It's over. It's over. And then you hug them and everything's all right. And that's the thing about dunya. It's just, we're getting the tooth pulled out. It's 70 years, 80 maximum. But if you relate it to infinity, it's canceled out. So stop complaining. Really, just sit back and relax. You know what it's like? I've seen this with my own child. And you could do this. Take the child, don't do this. Take the child, I don't want to be responsible. It's America, they sue you if stuff like that. If you take a child and you throw the child up, there's a point where you see this, they go into this state of complete panic. And then when they come back to your arms, they're laughing. That is dunya. I guarantee you, that moment, that is your life. You came from God, and you're going back to God. And there's just a moment where you're in a complete state of panic. But just relax. You're in good hands. You're in good hands. So just relax. The Moroccans say, رَيَّحْ بَالَكْ وَتَعْلَمَ السِّبَاحَةِ. Relax the mind and learn to swim. Seriously, relax the mind. Do you remember when you first learned to swim? I remember. I'll never forget it. I got placed on my back, and the person told me, relax completely. I was scared to death. Relax completely. What are you talking about? I'm going to drown. No, you're not. You're going to float. Relax. And it was frightening in the beginning, but once you learn to relax, suddenly you were floating and everything was fine. And that's dunya. You just have to relax. We're in the ocean of dunya, and we need to just float. Just keep afloat. Don't drown. They're all drowning out there. Because it's, the person who drowns, they come up and they're in a state of panic. If they would just relax, they wouldn't drown. But the panic is causing them to drown. And that's what's happening with all these people out there. It's the panic. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا. Human beings are created in a state of anxiety. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. When any harm afflicts them, they panic. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. And when good comes to them, they withhold. They don't want to share it with anybody. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. Except the people of prayer. They're in a different state. And that's the people we want to be from the mustathnayun, the people that are exempted from that other state. Because that trust in Allah is what saves you. So that's the fifth, is tadarru'. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, بَلْ إِيَّاهُ تَدْعُونَ فَيَكْشِفَ مَا تَدْعُونَ إِلَيْهِ إِنْ شَاءَ. They call to Him. Rather, to Him may your call be, and Allah, فَيَكْشِفُ مَا تَدْعُونَ إِلَيْهِ إِنْ شَاءَ. He will remove what you're calling Him for to remove, the calamity, if He desires. إِنْ شَاءَ. So that's one of the benefits. قُلْ مَنْ يُنَجِّيكُم مِّن ذُلُمَاتِ الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ تَدْعُونَهُ تَضَرُّعًا وَخُفْيًا. Say, who will save you from the darknesses of the land and the sea when you call on Him, abased and humble, in fear and in concealment? The sixth benefit, الْحِلْمُ عَمَّنْ صَدْرَتْ عَنْهُ الْمُصِيبَةِ. The sixth one is that you're forbearing toward the one who has afflicted you. الحلم عمن صدرت عنه المصيبة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ لَأَوَّاهٌ حَلِيمٌ. Ibrahim was somebody who had compassion for other people. يَتَأَوَّى. He felt compassion. Some of the ulama say that's the awwah. And then halim is the gentleness. So, فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِغُلَامٍ حَلِيمٍ. We gave them good tidings of a ghulam halim, Ismail alayhi salam, the young boy, a forbearing boy. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ فِيكَ خَصْلَتَيْنِ يُحِبُّهُمَ اللَّهُ الْحِلْمُ وَالْأَنَاهُ. You have two qualities that Allah loves: forbearance and deliberation. وتختلف مراتب الحلم باختلاف المصائب في صغرها وكبرها فالحلم عند أعظم المصائب أفضل من كل حلم. And there is a difference in the rankings of forbearance based upon the differences of the calamities in their enormities and in their severity, whether they're great or small. So a forbearance shown when there's great calamities is much greater than any other type of forbearance. So that's one of the great blessings, is the ability to show forbearance, because it's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The seventh one, السابعة العفو عن جانيها, that you can actually forgive them. So it's not just having forbearance, but you actually forgive them. And you get one of the greatest rewards is forgiving people that have actually done you a wrong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. Those who forgive people. Allah loves those people. وَمَنْ عَافَى وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. That the one who pardons and who rectifies, his reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالْعَافُ عَنْ أَعْظَمِهَا أَفْضَلُ مِنْ كُلِّ عَفُ. And when you forgive people for great calamities, it's better than any other forgiveness. See, if you have family members that cause you problems, you have to forgive them for the sake of Allah. Don't do it for them. Do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, one of the things people do, if you get angry and you leave, you run out of the room, and then you don't talk to that person, the more you delay that time, the deeper that it festers. It's like a boil. If you because that's a jarha. If you immediately go, seriously, I got upset with somebody. I went, took a shower, and then just went and asked their forgiveness. And I was not the wrongdoer. The thing can be healed. If you don't do that, it becomes more and more difficult as time goes on. It becomes more and more difficult. It festers. And then it's pride comes in, shaitan, saying, it's not your fault. You didn't do it. He should be the one asking forgiveness of you. Who does he think he is? Don't worry about who he thinks he is. Worry about who you think you are. That's the problem. The problem with the world is who we think we are. So asking forgiveness of people is a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الثامنة والصبر عليها is the eighth one is to be patient during the tribulation, because إن الله مع الصابرين. Allah is with patient ones. So when you show patience, it's a great blessing. And intidhar al-faraj is one of the greatest acts of ibadah, is to actually just wait for an opening from Allah. And there's Muslims, you see, there's Muslims, if you tell them, Muslims need to be patient, how long are we going to be patient? There's this kind of thing like, it's like we've been patient. That is not patience. You cannot call a donkey patient in Arabic. You don't say al-himar sabir. It doesn't work, because patience is based on understanding. You can bear things. تحتمل شيء. That's what it is. تحتمل الضرب. They just bear it. But patience is different. Patience has what's called ihtisab, which is where you actually reckon with your Lord a reward. You're believing there's a reward coming from being patient. وهو موجب محبة الله تعالى وكثرة ثوابه. This brings on the mahabba of Allah, the love of Allah, and also the abundant reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبَّ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah loves the patient ones. So by being patient, you're actually incurring the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, engendering the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّ الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. The sabirun are given their rewards without any reckoning. Some rewards you get, it's reckoned already. Whereas patience, it's without reckoning. وَمَا أُعْطِيَ أَحَدٌ عَطَاءً خَيْرًا وَأَوْسَعًا مِنَ الصَّبْرِ. No one was given a blessing better and more vast than patience. The ninth one, الْفَرَحُ بِهَا لِأَجْلِ فَوَائِدِهَا, is to actually be happy, glad about what's happening because of those benefits. قال عليه الصلاة والسلام والذي نفسي بيده إن كانوا ليفرحون بالبلاء كما تفرحون بالرخاء. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that Imam Ahmad relates about the peoples that went before, they used to be as happy during calamities and tribulations as you are during times of abundance. وقال ابن مسعود رضي الله تعالى عنه حبذا المكروهان الموت والفقر. How wondrous those two distasteful things, death and poverty. Because in the akhirah, poverty in this world is a blessing, because your hisab is much less if you're poor. And that's what Imam Ali radiallahu anhu said about wealth. He said, حلاله حساب وحرامه عقاب. What's halal from it is a reckoning, and what's prohibited from it is a punishment. And that's why the zuhad are called a'qalun nas. The most intelligent people are the people of zuhud, because they give up things because they don't want the problems that go with things. وَإِنَّمَا فَرِحُوا بِهَا إِذْ لَا لِشِدَّتِهَا وَمَرَارَتِهَا بِنِسْبَةِ إِلَى ثَمْرَتِهَا وَفَائِدَتِهَا. That they were happy with it, not because they happened, but rather because of the rewards and the fruits that came from those tribulations. كَمَا يَفْرَحُ مَنْ عَظَمَتْ أدواءه بشرب الأدوية الحاسمة لها مع تجرعه لمرارتها. So just as somebody who is happy, who has great diseases, when he drinks that bitter cure that will remove the disease, he's drinking it and he's happy about it because he's thinking not about the bitterness and the difficulty of the remedy, but he's thinking about the benefits that will come from taking the bitter remedy. And so this is the way people are of Allah with the tribulations. And the 10th, al-ashiratu ashukru alayha, to be grateful for it. لما تضمنته من فوائدها كما يشكر المريض الطبيب القاطع لأطرافه المانع له من شهواته لما يتوقع في ذلك من البرء والشفاء. Just like because of what are contained in there of the benefits, as a sick person would be grateful to the doctor who is severing one of his limbs or preventing him from his desires because he believes in that is a cure for him. You go to the surgeon, the surgeon cut your hand off because there's gangrene. What do they say to the surgeon afterwards? Thank you so much, doctor. You know, I can't tell you how much he just cut your hand off. Why are you thanking him? Because you realize that he was doing you a benefit, even though outwardly he harmed you. And so in the same way, those people who have tribulation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala know that Allah only does these things to benefit them, to make them grow. And so they actually say, Alhamdulillah wa shukrillah, al-hadiyata ashara, the 11th one, tamhisuha lidhunubi wal khataya. The purification that these calamities have towards their wrongs and their sins. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَيَعْفُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. That anything that afflicts you is from what your own hands have wrought, and He pardons much of what you have done. In other words, what you're being afflicted with is actually much less than what you deserve. And in that, one of the things that Imam An-Nasafi radiallahu anhu says in his tafsir of this, and his tafsir is, it's a beautiful tafsir, but one of the things he says in that, he said, if you reflect on the meaning of that, you will show gratitude for your calamities, because you will realize that it's a blessing that they're much less than they are. That's the secret of that ayah. وَيَعْفُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. That's why Allah followed that up, that you're afflicted with your wrong actions. You can feel bad about that, but then when you realize that He's pardoned so much, it actually makes you feel grateful that Allah has overlooked so much of your shortcomings. وَلَا يُصِيبُ الْمُؤْمِنَ وَصَبٌ وَلَا نَصَبٌ حَتَّى الْهَمَّ يُهِمُّهُ وَالشَّوْكَ يُشَاكُهَا إِلَّا كَفَّرَ بِهِ عَنْ سَيِّئَاتِهِ. That the believer is not afflicted with any difficulty, any exhaustion, fatigue, anxiety that concerns him, or even a thorn that punctures him, except that Allah removes with it, that he steps on, a thorn that he steps on, except that Allah removes with it his wrong actions. So those are all blessings. So no disease, no exhaustion, fatigue, anything like that. It all comes as removal of wrong actions. Subhanallah. الثاني عشر رحمة أهل البلاء ومساعدتهم على بلواهم. The 12th blessing is the compassion that Allah enables you to show to people that are in tribulation, and to help them. Because مَن نَفَّسَ عَن مُؤْمِن, whoever relieves a kurba, one of the calamities of this world for a believer, Allah will relieve a calamity for him on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. So people in tribulation become an opportunity. And one of the things that Imam Muhammad al-Hassan, Hafidhullah, one of the things he says in his commentary on the Mathara, he said there's two conditions that people have. One is where you have the afiyah, you have well-being in yourself, in your family, but you get problems of other people. And the other is that you have those problems. And he said that if you don't help people that have problems, then Allah will give you those problems. That's the nature of the world. This is it. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ is to test you. So you're either tested in yourself or with others. But you have to respond appropriately. So avoiding those things is a danger. And that's why the tribulations of others are actually a blessing. If they come to you for help or something, it's an opportunity to earn some closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And الناس معافى ومبتلى فرحموا أهل البلاء واشكروا الله على العافية. In the Muwatta of Imam Malik, Isa alayhi salam was reported to have said, people are of two types, people of well-being and people of tribulation. So have compassion for the people of tribulation and show gratitude for well-being. That's why if you're in good shape, don't complain. Tell somebody to punch you every time you complain or something, because you don't want, if you complain and you don't have anything to complain about, Allah will give you things to complain about. And then you'll think about how good things were. Remember we used to complain about that? What were we thinking? There's people that say that. When real calamities hit them, they think, what was I complaining about before? Well, the truth is, stop complaining now because it could get worse. That's the whole point. It could get worse. And one of the poets said, وَإِنَّمَا يَرْحَمُ الْعُشَاقَ مَنْ عَشِقَ. The only people that really feel sorry for the people in passionate love are people who have been in passionate love. So when you see people of tribulation, you should remember I've been there, I remember what that was like. And show compassion to them. الرابعة عشرة, the 14th one. The ثالثة عشرة. معرفة قدر نعمة العافية. Tribulations give you the blessing of having true knowledge of the extent of the blessing of well-being. So when tribulations come, you really appreciate what well-being is. So it's better to appreciate it when you've got it. والشكر عليها فإن النعم لا يعرف مقدارها إلا بعد فقدها. The nature of blessings is that nobody realizes the extent of them until they've lost them. That's human being. ظلوم كفار. He's just oppressive to himself and constantly denying the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الرابعة عشرة, the 14th, ما أعد الله تعالى على هذه الفوائد من ثواب الآخرة على اختلاف مراتبها. What Allah has prepared from the blessings of the reward of the akhirah based on these varying ranks. So this is also a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared rewards for the calamities that you bear patiently or with contentment based on the different ranks. There are people that are content, they'll have a higher station in paradise than people that were simply patient. And patience is the lowest maqam. In the maqamat of the tawbah is actually the first one. الخامسة عشرة ما في طيها من الفوائد الخفية. What is hidden inside the folds of these calamities of blessings. That's another benefit. فعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا ويجعل الله فيه خيرا كثيرا. Maybe you dislike a thing and Allah will put in it much good. See, you don't know. There's things hidden in blessings. So I'll give you an example. I missed a flight once. And alhamdulillah, I've never been upset about missing a flight. I guarantee you. Because I always think if the plane goes down, I'm going to feel like such a fool for having run to catch the plane or something like that. So I just relax. You never want to be on a plane that you ran to catch and then it goes down. What was I running for? So if you miss it, you miss it. But I missed a plane. Everybody said, oh, they ended up giving me like $500 back because they had to reroute the ticket and things like that. And the difference was nothing in time and things like that. There's always benefits that are hidden in what you think is a trouble. And the thing about the world is that if you enter into a state with your experience of the world in which whenever these things happen, you just accept them, you'll always find the benefits. You'll see them always. Allah will show you. You'll know there's a benefit. في كل تأخير خيرة. In every delay, there's God's choice in it. That Allah, and that's part of what the mu'min does. He submits to it. And the 16th one is that tribulations prevent you from arrogance and from evil and from pride and from tyranny and doing all these things like Nimrod. He says, had Nimrod been a poor, sickly person, deaf and dumb, he would have never done all those horrible things that he did. The same with the tyrants of the world. Had they been born impoverished and this and that. But it's those things that make them arrogant. And then the 17th one is contentment. الرضا الموجب لرضوان الله تعالى فإن المصائب تنزل بالبر والفاجر. Because tribulations afflict the good and the evil. And so whoever doesn't like it, then it's just on him. And he's lost the dunya and the akhirah. And whoever's pleased with it, he's pleased because he knows that paradise is better than anything in this world. And if those tribulations are what it takes to get him into paradise, then he's content with it. So these are the blessings that, some of the blessings, I mean there's many blessings, but these are the ones that Sultan Al-Ulema ibn Abd Salam enumerated. And they're good to remember in these times. But I will end this by saying, read history. These are not bad times. Muslims shouldn't be so negative. There's been much worse times. I mean, there's aspects that are bad about this time, and certainly one of the greatest calamities of the time is that we don't have a lot of people of knowledge anymore, and we don't have levels of deen and things like this. But just in terms of outward dunya calamities, this period is nothing if you read history. It's nothing. The real calamities of this age are spiritual calamities. They're not worldly calamities. So what we should be, if we're going to weep over the calamities of the age, we should be weeping about the loss of iman, about the lack of religion, about the lack of spirituality. We shouldn't be weeping about all this stuff we see out there because it's just not that bad. I'm sorry. And if you think it is, you haven't read history. Things have been much worse. I mean, read about earlier wars and how many people died and plagues that afflicted people and wiped out. A third of Europe was wiped out by the Black Plague. And there's too many blessings. We've got the blessings we have. It's just overwhelming. That's why, inshallah, we'll just all ask Allah to put us in a state of gratitude with Allah and make us from the shakirin. You know, really, make us from the shakirin and just not complain. Even the thing about complainers, even complainers don't like complainers. Really. They want to complain, but they don't want to listen to anybody complain. So, inshallah, we'll all stop whining. It's the maqam of the tifl, is to whine. That's what I always tell my boys. Nobody likes a whiner, even a whiner. And they laugh, because they know it's true. So whining is a maqam. It's the maqam of the tifl. That's what a whiner is. And the rijal, and the rijal is in haqiqah, it doesn't mean a male. The rajul is male and female. It's the one who has reached the maqam of the adult. It's the mature one. That's what it means. It's the mature one. Rujula is maturity. So inshallah, Allah make us all mature. Jazakumullah khairan. Very nice to see everybody. And we have great blessing, as you know, the people here, Sheikh Muhammad Yaqubi, Sheikh Salik. It's a real blessing. I mean, the level of knowledge is immense. And inshallah, may Allah make us worthy containers for what's being poured into us. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.